stay where you are. Stay in the condition that you are in now. Married folks, stay married and accept your marital responsibilities to your spouse. Widows and widowers, it's good to remain single. He stresses that throughout this chapter in the context. Married Christians, stay that way. Don't divorce. Circumcised or uncircumcised, or married to unbelievers, stay married if at all possible. Okay, we looked at that last week. If you're circumcised or uncircumcised, stay in that situation. Don't try to change. You're a slave when you became a Christian, remain where you are, remain in the situation. Then 25, there you go. Thank you very much. He's a genius, I tell you. Very good. So we're basically on the next slide now. Stay where you are. You're a slave or free, remain in the situation where you were. Virgins or unmarried or engaged people, it's better to stay single, Paul says, and he's going to give some reasoning for that. We'll look at that. And then finally, in those last two verses, if you're married, stay bound to your husband. But if you're a widow, stay single. Stay like you are. You can serve the Lord better, according to Paul, in that. Well, what we want to do is begin in verse 17 today. Mine says, concerning change of status. Paul says, nevertheless, stay in the situation that you were called. Basically, he's talking about their conversion. When you became a Christian. Look at chapter 1 in 1 Corinthians and verse 9. Basically, he's talking about their conversion. We have already seen when you became a Christian. Remember, in the context of believers and unbelievers, he used that word called. And verse 9. If your unbelieving partner is willing to stay with you, we have already seen when you became a Christian. Remember, in the context of believers and unbelievers, he used that word called. Verse 9. Us to peace. If your unbelieving partner is willing to stay with you, we have already seen when you became a Christian. Remember, in the context of verse 9, we read that God has called you into the fellowship of His Son. If your unbelieving partner is willing to stay with you, we have already seen when you became a Christian. Remember, in the context of verse 9, we read that God has called you through the gospel. Exactly. If your unbelieving partner is willing to stay with you, we have already seen when you became a Christian. Remember, in the context of verse 9, we read God has called through the gospel. Exactly. If your unbelieving partner is willing to stay with you, we have already seen when you became a Christian. Remember, in the context of verse 9, we read God has called through the gospel. Exactly. If your unbelieving partner is willing to stay with you, we have already seen when you became a Christian. Remember, in the context of verse 9, we read God has called through the gospel. Exactly. If your unbelieving partner is willing to stay with you, we have already seen when you became a Christian. Remember, in the context of verse 9, we read God has called through the gospel. Exactly. If your unbelieving partner is willing to stay with you, we have already seen when you became a Christian. Remember, in the context of verse 9, we read God has called through the gospel. Exactly. If your unbelieving partner is willing to stay with you, we have already seen when you became a Christian. Remember, in the context of verse 9, we read God has called through the gospel. Exactly. If your unbelieving partner is willing to stay with you, we have already seen when you became a Christian. Remember, in the context of verse 9, we read God has called through the gospel. Exactly. If your unbelieving partner is willing to stay with you, we have already seen when you became a Christian. Remember, in the context of verse 9, we read God has called through the gospel. Exactly. If your unbelieving partner is willing to stay with you, we have already seen when you became a Christian. Remember, in the context of verse 9, God has called through the Why would Paul stress staying where you're at? Pardon me? He's going to bring that up a little later, how you can really, if you stay single, if you can serve the Lord better, according to Paul, especially in light of the circumstances. Do you remember when we first talked about those first verses, it's good for a man not to touch a woman? That trying to think, to see what was going on in the context, there might have been some who were saying, I can be more spiritual by refraining from sexual relations with my wife. Or I can be more spiritual if I divorce my wife or my husband completely. I can devote myself to the Lord. So there were some who were doing that, and Paul is saying, whoa, stop. Serve the Lord where you're at. Serve the Lord where you're at. Look at what Gordon Fee says secondly. Change is not necessary. In fact, one may live out the Christian life in whatever setting that call took place. Thirdly, because of the fact that the settings themselves are irrelevant where you were, if change does not take place, that too is irrelevant. Change in these cases does not have religious or spiritual significance. That's basically what Paul is trying to say here. Serve the Lord where you're at. Okay? Very, very important in this context. Yes? That's the two extremes we looked at last week. There were some that thought they were so spiritual. Some commentators and theologians call them the pneumatics. That pnoi, P-N-E-U, is the Greek word that means spirit or breath. Okay, so some of these people were so spiritual. I have the Spirit. I can live any way I want. Do you remember what they said? I'm free. Do what I want. Others leaned toward the aesthetic end of things, where they said, oh no, the spiritual and the flesh have got to be separated. So I need to be away from my wife. I can't have sexual relations with my wife because that would be something fleshly. Good point. Well, let me ask you this. The end of verse 17, I was curious what your translation say. This is the rule I lay down in all of the churches. Are there other words, other translations for rule? This is what I ordain in all the churches. This is what I direct in all of the churches. All of those are good. They're all good translations. The word actually means to command, to rule, to direct, to ordain, to arrange, prescribe, to mandate. Paul is laying down something here that is a command. This is what I'm telling you to do. And I do this, Paul uses these words sometimes, doesn't he, in Corinthians, in all the churches. Not just for you guys. This is everybody. Okay? Stay where you are. Well, let's read on. Verse 18, was a man already circumcised when he was called? He should not become uncircumcised. Was a man uncircumcised when he was called? He should not be circumcised. We're not going to get into a lot of discussion about how one can become when he was called. He should not be circumcised. Believe it or not, we're not going to get into a lot of discussion about how one circumcised when he was circumcised. He should not be. They had surgery. Believe it or not, for that. We're not going to get into a lot of discussion about how one circumcised when he was circumcised. They had surgery. Believe it or not, for that. We're not going to get into a lot of your circumcision about how one circumcised when he was circumcised. They had surgery. Believe it or not, for that. We're not going to get into a lot of non-Jews about how one circumcised when he was circumcised. They had surgery. Believe it or not, for that. We're not going to get into a lot of non-Jews about how one circumcised when he was circumcised. They had surgery. bureaucracy for that to be circumcised, non-Jews, teachers, had surgery, bureaucracy for that to be circumcised, non-Jews, reading on